Hello and welcome to the new season of the Drawn and Redrawn, the Making of India's Internal Boundaries podcast. This is a part of a larger India State Stories project that explores the evolution of India's political and administrative boundaries. This project is an undertaking by the Centre for Legislative Education and Research at Flame University in Pune. In this new season, we embark on a journey through the fascinating histories and narratives of each Indian state and union territories, exploring the pivotal events, influential personalities, and societal transformations that have shaped the subcontinent. In this episode, we will explore the multifaceted demographic and socio-economic landscape of India, highlighting the extreme disparities across its various states and districts. This episode is based on a corresponding article written by our team at India State Stories. These articles have been converted to audio conversations with the help of Google's Notebook LM. You can find the relevant article link in the show notes. Now, let's dive into the conversation.
I want to start today with a bit of a visualization exercise. Picture a map of the world in your head. Now, zoom in on India.
That distinctive diamond shape, yeah.
Exactly. And, they're wired to categorize it as one unit.
One country.
One country, one government, one economy. It's neat, it's tidy. But the research we are covering today, specifically the India State Stories and the Diversity of Indian States report, suggests that this mental image is, fundamentally wrong.
It's what we could call the monolith myth.
Right, because the data shows that inside that single outline, the variations are just so extreme that India doesn't really operate like a standard nation-state.
It acts much more like a collection of distinct nations.
We often hear that phrase, a continent masquerading as a country, and usually it's just a poetic flourish.
But in this case, it's actually statistically true. I mean, if you look at the European Union, you expect differences between, say, Germany and Greece. But in India, the differences between states are often wider than the differences between entire European nations.
And that is the mission for this deep dive. We're not just here to say, wow, look at the diversity, isn't the food great? We want to unpack diversity as a policy challenge. Because how do you govern a place where the differences aren't just cosmetic, but structural?
Exactly. If your diagnosis of the problem is one country, but the reality is 20 different economic and social zones, your policy prescriptions are they're going to fail.
So we need to look at this through 4 specific pillars.
Right. We're talking demographics, economics, language, and the big one that keeps constitutional lawyers up at night, political representation.
And before we jump into that first pillar, I want to share the one data point that really hooked me. When we talk about scale, we aren't just talking about huge states. We are talking about districts.
Simple administrative units. And this is where the scale becomes almost impossible to comprehend.
There are single districts in India with larger populations than entire sovereign nations. You have a local bureaucrat, a district magistrate, managing more people than the Prime Minister of Norway.
Or New Zealand. It's an administrative nightmare. But okay, let's start with the raw numbers. Pillar 1, the weight of numbers.
The 2011 census gives us the headline, 1.21 billion people. We know it's higher now, but let's stick to that official data. And the number itself is huge, but it's the distribution that's the real story.
Right. It's clumpy. You've got these vast concentrations of humanity in the north and then distinct gaps elsewhere.
So let's look at the giant in the room, Uttar Pradesh or UP.
UP holds over 16% of the national population. To put that in a global context, if Uttar Pradesh were a country, it would be, what, the 5th or 6th most populous nation on Earth?
It's roughly the size of Brazil in terms of headcount.
Think about that. Brazil is this massive landmass, a federal government, state governments, vast resources. UP is just one state inside the Indian Union.
And then you swing the camera to the other extreme. You've got states like Sikkim or territories like Lakshadweep,
where the population is under 1 million people.
So under the same constitution, the same penal code, you have one unit acting like a global superpower and another acting like a mid-sized suburb.
And this imbalance creates what we can call the density shock. This is where the lived reality of an Indian citizen really diverges. It's not just about how many people there are, it's about how much space they have.
The data on this is staggering. If you look at Bihar and West Bengal, you are seeing densities of over 1,000 people per square kilometer.
That is an incredibly resource-constrained environment. I mean, every square inch of land is accounted for. Every seat on a bus, every bed in a hospital. It's a competition.
The infrastructure is just under constant crushing pressure.
And then you fly over to, say, Arunachal Pradesh or the Andaman and Nicobar Islands.
And what happens?
The density just drops. It's fewer than 20 people per square kilometer.
Per 1,000 to 20.
It's a completely different world. And this is why a one-size-fits-all policy is a disaster. Let's take healthcare. If you're designing a system for Bihar, you rely on mass volume. You build a huge hospital. And because the density is so high, thousands of people can get there easily.
But if you drop that same blueprint into Arunachal,
It fails completely. With a density of 20, nobody lives near the hospital. The catchment area is too spread out. You need mobile clinics, telemedicine, a decentralized approach.
but if New Delhi mandates a standard hospital model,
One of those states is going to suffer.
this brings us back to that district anomaly we mentioned. The sources highlight districts like North 24 Parganas in West Bengal and Thane in Maharashtra.
These are the urban heavyweights.
These single districts have populations that exceed smaller Indian states combined.
Hmm.
And then you contrast that with a place like Diban Valley in Arunachal Pradesh.
Which has fewer than 10,000 residents total.
So you have an administrator in Thane dealing with millions of people, migration, slums, mass transit.
And another administrator in Dibang Valley dealing with fewer people than you'd find at a decent rock concert. And the analysis in the source material, it points out this creates a two Indias dynamic.
How so?
You have urban districts driven by migration and economic gravity places that are growing because people are moving there. And then you have rural districts, especially in the Hindi belt, that are growing simply because of high fertility rates.
Which means the needs of the population are totally different. One needs jobs and housing.
And the other needs basic maternal health and education. Precisely. And that leads us directly to the wallet. We've talked about the people. Now we have to talk about the money, the economic divide.
This is where that continent comparison, it stops being a metaphor and it just becomes an economic reality. The disparity among Indian states isn't shrinking.
No, if anything, it seems to be calcifying. In fact, the gap between the richest and poorest states in India is wider than the gap within the European Union or the United States.
Let's look at the leaders first. According to the RBI data from 2021-22, who is sitting at the top of the table?
Well, if we look at per capita GDP, which is the best measure of individual prosperity, the leaders are Goa, Delhi, and Telangana.
But Goa is way out in front, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Goa is at about 472,000 rupees per person. Delhi is around 389,000. These are economies that have, successfully transitioned. They're service-oriented, urbanized.
And then you have the total GDP giants of Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Gujarat.
Right. Maharashtra alone has a GDP of over 31 lakh crores. That's an industrial engine. These states look a lot like middle-income nations.
Okay, now let's look at the other side of the coin. The sources refer to the Hindi Belt paradox.
It is a paradox because, as we just discussed, states like Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, they have massive populations. In theory, they should be huge consumer markets, but their per capita income is incredibly low. The economic engine just hasn't started.
Let's hit them with the specific numbers because the comparison is just so stark. We said Goa was at 472,000. Where is Bihar?
Bihar is at 47,498 rupees.
And Uttar Pradesh?
73,048.
I just want to pause on that. Goa is basically 10 times wealthier per person than Bihar.
10 times. Imagine trying to run a single currency union where one member is 10 times richer than another. It makes setting monetary policy incredibly difficult.
Because what's good for Goa might be terrible for Bihar.
Exactly. If the central bank raises interest rates to cool down an overheating economy in the industrialized West, it might completely choke off the fragile growth in the agrarian North.
You're trying to set one temperature for a house where one room is a sauna and the other is a freezer.
That's a great way to put it. And the sources point out that the poorest income groups are concentrated in these agriculture-dominant states.
Which creates a vicious cycle.
For sure. They have the highest population growth, but the lowest economic growth. Meanwhile, the South and West have low population growth and high economic growth. The demographic dividend is in one place, and the capital is in another.
So we have a demographic divide overlapping with an economic divide. Okay, now let's add a third layer of complexity. Communication.
The Tower of Babel.
This is Pillar 3, linguistic diversity. And honestly, this is where the data gets really fun, but also really messy.
India ranks 4th globally in language diversity, but the way we count it is just fascinating.
Okay, so the Census 2011 recorded 19,569 raw mother tongues.
Which is essentially just people telling the census taker what they speak. I speak this village dialect. I speak that tribal slang.
So the census authorities have to play the role of strict librarian and group them all.
Right. They whittled that number down to 270 mother tongues and finally into 121 official languages. But to understand how this impacts policy, the sources use a metric called Greenberg's Diversity Index, or LDI.
Okay, break that down for us.
It's a probability scale. It goes from 0 to 1. If you take two random people from a state, what's the probability that they speak different mother tongues?
A score of 0 means everyone speaks the same language.
And 1 means total fragmentation.
So who is the most diverse?
The Northeast, no question. Nagaland and Arunachal Pradesh score above 0.9.
That makes sense. Rugged terrain, isolated valleys, lots of distinct tribal languages.
Exactly. But the least diverse list contains this massive surprise. You see Kerala, which makes sense, it's heavily in Malayalam, but then you see Uttar Pradesh.
And this is the twist. On paper, UP has a diversity index of just 0.11. It looks like a monolith.
The official stats say 94% of UP speaks Hindi. So from New Delhi's perspective, it looks like a homogeneous block.
But the research tells us to look closer.
Right. Hindi in the census is a massive umbrella. It just swallows up dozens of distinct mother tongues.
We're talking about Bhojpuri, Awadhi, Bundeli.
Braj Bhasha. These aren't just minor accents. Bhojpuri is spoken by over 10% of the population. Awadhi has this rich literary tradition going back centuries. These are languages in their own right.
So what happens if you do the recalculation? If you take that umbrella away and count these as separate languages?
UP's diversity index triples. It jumps from 0.11 to 0.34.
That is a huge swing. It basically says the official statistics are homogenizing the reality of North India.
It's masking the cultural complexity. We tend to think of the South as diverse, and the North as this big block of Hindi speakers, but the reality on the ground is that the North is incredibly fragmented, too. It's just administratively hidden.
And this matters because language is identity, and identity drives politics.
Which leads us to the final and, frankly, the most explosive pillar.
The freeze. Pillar number 4, political representation.
This is where all those previous lines, demographics, money, language, they all intersect. The stakes are the seats in the Lok Sabha, the lower house of parliament.
Now, in any functioning democracy, the rule is usually representation by population, more people equals more seats.
In theory. And currently, the power centers do match the population data we discussed. UP has 80 seats, Maharashtra has 48, West Bengal 42, Bihar 40.
But here's the catch. The current seat allocation, it isn't based on 2024 data. It's not even based on the 2011 census.
It is based on the 1971 census.
We're allocating political power in the 21st century based on where people lived over 50 years ago.
It sounds absurd, but you have to understand the context of the time. You go back to 1976, the 42nd Amendment. What was the big national priority?
Population control.
Right. The government was pushing family planning aggressively, and they realized that if they kept adjusting parliamentary seats based on population growth, they created a perverse incentive.
Explain that.
Well, if a state did a good job of lowering its birth rate, its population growth would slow down. If seats are tied to population, that state would eventually lose seats.
So they would be politically punished for succeeding at a national goal.
And conversely, states that failed to control their population, mostly the northern states, would keep growing and gaining more seats. They'd be rewarded for failure.
So the southern states, particularly Kerala and Tamil Nadu, who were really effective at lowering birth rates.
They looked at the central government and said, look, we're doing what you asked. Don't take away our voice in parliament for it.
So the government said, fine. We will freeze the seat count at the 1971 levels.
It was meant to be temporary, but then in 2001, the 84th Amendment extended this freeze all the way to 2026.
Well, looking at the calendar, we're staring right at that cliff.
The 2026 cliff. The freeze is set to end. And now we have a massive problem because the demographics did not stabilize evenly.
No. As we saw in the first section, the northern states exploded in population. The South stabilized.
So right now, the value of a vote is completely unequal. A member of parliament from Uttar Pradesh might represent, 3 million people? An MP from Kerala might represent 1.5 million.
That violates the basic democratic principle of one person, one vote.
It does. But fixing it violates the federal bargain.
Because if we update the map to reflect the current reality,
The North gains massive power. Projections suggest UP and Bihar could gain dozens of seats. The southern states would lose their relative standing. They would effectively become politically irrelevant compared to the demographic giants of the North.
so you have the economic powerhouses in the South who are funding a lot of the national budget through taxes, potentially losing their political voice to the states that are economically struggling, but demographically booming.
It creates a massive, massive tension. You have a situation where the North provides the people and the South provides the money. If you shift political power entirely to the North, the South might feel like it's being taxed without meaningful representation.
Wow. It seems like an impossible knot to untie. You either compromise democracy or you compromise federalism.
And that is going to be the defining political fight of the next decade. How do you balance the rights of the states as distinct cultures against the raw math of democracy?
So let's try to synthesize this for the listener. We've covered a huge amount of ground.
We have.
We started with the map and realized it's a deception. India isn't a monolith. It's a collection of variations so extreme they mimic international borders.
We saw districts larger than nations. We saw densities that range from a crowded elevator to a deserted island.
We saw an economy where the richest state is 10 times wealthier than the poorest, creating two completely distinct economic worlds inside one border.
And we found that even the languages are hiding inside other languages, masking the true diversity of the North.
And finally, we realized the political machinery is frozen in 1971 because the reality of 2026 is just too volatile to handle.
So when you, the listener, hear news about India in the future, the lens you need to be using is, well, you have to abandon the idea of the average Indian.
The average doesn't exist.
It doesn't. Whenever you hear a policy proposal or a market strategy or a news story, you have to ask, which India? Does this policy work for the industrialized, aging South? Does it work for the young, agrarian, high-density North?
Because treating it as a single unit is the surest way to misunderstand it.
Exactly. The challenge for India isn't just development, it's holding together a continent-sized diversity under a single democratic framework.
I want to leave the listener with one final thought, going back to that 2026 deadline. We know the map has to change. The Constitution implies it must.
It's inevitable.
Given the sheer scale of the disparity we've discussed today, is it possible that the current federal structure is just too rigid? Are we looking at a future where India needs to radically decentralize, giving states much more autonomy just to keep this continent functioning?
That is the billion-dollar question. Can you run a continent with a single instruction manual? History suggests it's very, very hard.
A massive question for a massive topic. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us.
Always a pleasure to explore the data.
We'll get you out to the next one.